Omega Rights is in the gutters. It's in the trenches in this story, right? So the first book I read in November was In Love's Key, Reprised by Guri Nojiro, I believe is how you pronounce their name. They're a mangaka from Japan. I actually have another book from them that I read on what was formerly Futekia and is now called Manga Planet. I believe that was the manga website I was reading it on. And I now have a hard copy of that. It's like The Beast Moon or something. Like, I'll pop it up here and I'll also put it in the comments. Really love that. This one was a 4-star for me. It's a contemporary setting in which a conductor, Kiri, returns to the countryside of his birth because let's be honest, like, he's kind of an asshole. And he has some past trauma that explains it a little bit, but really has this prickly black cat persona that a lot of people don't vibe with. And so he goes back to his hometown, that rural countryside, and he meets Osamu/Sammy, who is never really explained if he might be half Japanese, because he has blonde hair, but if you read manga, a lot of times, like, you know, characters just have different colored hair. It doesn't really speak to ethnicity. But they nickname Osamu Sammy, which is a very Western name in my opinion. So comment down below if you happen to be a royalty or distinguished guest that is Japanese. Is that a common Japanese nickname for Osamu? Because if so, then, you know, I'm off on that. But anyway, Osamu is Sammy is a total golden retriever. And so the relationship really, really works. It starts slow because Kiri is in his feelings for valid reasons. But like I said, like, he is kind of an asshole. And he really opens up and becomes like his true authentic self in front of Sammy. I think Sammy's nickname for Kiri was also so cute. He calls him Maestro because he's a conductor. There's a bit of an age gap too. And I don't want to spoil anything, but that really sets the foundation. So if you like BL, you like a black cat / golden retriever relationship, I really do think you'll like this manga. Just be prepared that it starts slow, but chef's kiss, it pays off in the end. Before I continue, big shout out to Kodansha USA Publishing. I believe they're the biggest manga publisher in Japan, but don't quote me on that. All that to say, they are the ones that have given me all these manga arcs, and I am just so grateful because some of them are like old favorites, some of them are just new. I've never read these authors, or they're new to me in general, and I'm just really, really grateful basically that they're put me on their auto approval list. And if you're on their auto approval list, if it's not an exclusive club, I don't care, because it is hard to get art copies, and so I'm just really thankful. And also shout out to Lyonne Raleigh, who I mispronounce her name every single time. I have to say Leon Kennedy from Resident Evil in my head to pronounce it right, because she put me on her permanent art team this month in December, and I read one of her books in November to get on that, and she has been my favorite author this year. I've read almost her entire catalog. So just a shout out, as I get a NetGalley approval right now as I'm recording this, just a shout out to publishers and authors who give you know, little guys, well, little women like me, you get what I'm trying to say here, a chance. And, you know, I don't have a huge platform, and so it's really, really nice when I can read more books. So back to our scheduled programming. Book 2 is also an art copy, hence the shout out to publishers giving me art copies, and that is Light of My Life by, I believe it's Fuuko Minami and then Takiba. I think Takiba is the artist because I'm actually reading another arc this month. I guess they just got picked up and are getting published a lot in the English language right now by them, and the art styles are super, super similar. So I can't remember who's the author and who's the artist, but I'm pretty sure Fuuko is the author, and then Takiba has to be the artist because it's so similar to the book I'll be talking about in January when I do December's reading wrap up. So the basic premise of this is another contemporary setting, another BL, boys love, gay romance, essentially. And this one features Minagi, who is like this gifted medical student who gives that up because of an incident involving him and his childhood best friend Aki, which I really can't talk about because it's going to be a spoiler. This one was a 3.75 for me because I wasn't like super invested in the relationship. The characters are interesting in of themselves, if that makes sense, but sometimes like the spark between them, I couldn't really understand. Like they were very much opposites attract, if that makes sense. Because of this incident that happened in high school, Aki ends up a hairdresser, and Managi ends up being a host. And so you kind of go through like their ups and downs as they reunite as adults and try to figure life out, essentially. It is, like I said, it's another one that I couldn't really connect with the romance. That's why I've rated it a little lower at 3.75 compared to the 4-star I gave the last book. And essentially it was good, but it was just, like I said, like I really have to root for the romance in a romance. And so even if all the elements, the art, everything else is hitting for me in a manga, if I'm just a little bit on the edge about that, I don't give it a 4-star. Next up, the third book was an arc, but not from Kondasha this time. And that was All-Negro Comics, the first Black comic anthology, I believe, is the subtitle, but don't quote me. Look at the pretty picture on the camera and check out the description to learn more. This one was a 3.75, but more because the stories themselves, because they're older, they're set in the 50s, and like 60s, I believe, they just, don't hit for me. Even the rewritten versions that are featured at the end of the book, which I thought were pretty cool, but just as a historical artifact, it was fantastic. So I could not give it lower than a 3-star, but I couldn't really give it a 4-star. So that's hence why I gave it the 3.75, which shout out to Storygraph having that as a marker for books, because I feel like 0.5 a lot of times does not express those that are on the cusp of being even better, right, star-wise. And so I really love the 0.75 system that they have. So it was All-Negro Comics. This is essentially a collection of comics that were published together, and the intention was to create a All-Negro comics like magazine back in the day. Now, while that didn't pan out, these modern-day Black comic artists brought this back. I believe it was kickstarted originally, and then there's like getting a republished hardcover edition that just is really fantastic. It features a ton of essays. It features historical artifacts like the original comics, obviously, and it features like these rewritten, retelling imaginings that I thought were really cool too. I will say one story I could have seen myself reading in the modern day, and that was Ace Harlem story, which was like a Black detective set in Harlem. And while it has a real moralistic tone, really and truthfully, if you know the history of comics, because of the comic authority and the code, etc., tended to have a moralistic tone. And so I say all that to say it was really nice. Like I could see myself reading Ace Harlem if it was on shelves at my local comic book store today. Jumping back into BL land, we have Omega Megaera by Maki Moruko, I believe. I probably just butchered that because, again, I don't have the books in front of me. I'm going off of memory and jumping between Storygraph here. But this one was the first in what is apparently a super long series. I think it has like 10 volumes of Japan that are getting like translated because it's finished, 10 or 13, and it's finished and getting translated here in the US and other places. And it is a Megaverse story. And if you're familiar with the Megaverse, you know what to expect, basically. But it gets even weirder than that. It is actually really hard to explain. It's in this like pseudo historical time setting. And Omega rights, they don't exist. Like they typically don't exist in Omegaverse stories, but like Omega rights is in the gutters. It's in the trenches in this story, right? There's a really, really creepy, disgusting, I want him dead clan head of this really wealthy and important family. And they have this concept of a Megaera who essentially is barren. They can't have children as an Omega, and that's your only duty as an Omega. And so this Megaera hooks up with his father-in-law's illicit love child, which I don't even want to say love child because he's a literal, if you read it, be warned, it's very disgusting how this child was born. And makes him a fake alpha to take over and destroy the family / win back the love of his piece of trash husband. It is soap opera. It is a literal soap opera. I gave it a 4.75 star just because it was so addictive and I was so frustrated and so just enraged reading it. And typically for me, I don't have like a real complicated like scale when it comes to ratings. It is very much the feelings that a story invokes in me, and good or bad, positive or negative, if a story gets me locked in, it typically does not fall below a 4 star. The reason why I wasn't a 5-star is because I can't imagine rereading the book, and I cannot imagine continuing the series. I think I will literally just skip to the end. Like, that's how pissed off I was at some of these members in this book. The other interesting thing about this is that this author is the writer of Pornographer, which is like an adult BL that, in my opinion, is way more mainstream to bring over to a US audience, even though it has some stuff in it too, but nothing to the degree this has. And so I'm wondering if this is a case of what gets popular in fan circles is not popular in Japan as much. But I swear to you, Pornographer, I'll link that in the comments if it's true, but I believe it got a live action adaptation. So it had to have been doing some numbers in Japan. So I'm just like confused why that's not getting brought over, but this is getting brought over. The other thing I want to point out is that if you've ever read the historical shoujo, it's actually a shoujo, but it is a boy's love. It's a complicated history of this whole genre, really. But it's called Kei's Ki no Uta, I believe that's what you call it. It is very similar. And that's actually giving the book some props. It has that feel. And it was so funny. I had that feeling while reading it. And then when I read the author afterward, because yes, I'm that nerd. I read the author's little interview at the end of mangas. She was talking about how she wanted to write a shoujo and ended up, writing this BL. So I felt it through the writing. And that's a compliment because I am a shoujo lover. And especially the deep psychological, gender transgressions that was happening in 60s and 70s shoujo especially. So all that to say, 4.75, but it's really not a recommendation. It is off of the feeling I felt reading this, because I promise you, if you see me with that physical book in my collection, if you see it on my Megaverse shelf, slap me through the screen, because I do not want to read any more of that trashy family. But props to the author, because it was an addictive read. Now, the next book, which is actually a children's book on this list, I read very diversely in general, but this reading month was very up and down when it comes to genre and format. That book is something kind of really special because one, it just got an English translation. It came out in, I believe, 1975. Two, it is apparently like a classic children's book in Japan, and I actually read it as my classics pick for the Hercad book tag, because look, your girl had to get it where she could live it. I was not about to pick up one of these other classics on my shelf and try to read it in November, seeing as I was mainlining all of these manga. And three, it is apparently, in a very messy way, the inspiration behind my favorite Studio Ghibli film, Spirited Away. And while the inspired is very loose, because apparently there was some legal battle between the Studio Ghibli and the author of this book / the artist of the original book, I can see it with the two heroines, Chihiro in the film and in the book, The Village Beyond the Mist by Sachiko Kashiwaba, our heroine, our protagonist, little Lena. And in this book, she gets this weird clown umbrella from her father. It already starts a little bit of a doozy. She is super young. I think she's in 6th grade. And her father, I don't know if this is cross-country Japan, but she's sent on a train to go to this mystical village, Silver Mountain Village. Now, I did watch a documentary a while ago that because of the safety factor in Japan, a lot of parents sending very young children, I'm talking 2, 3, off to do tasks by themselves. So in a Japanese context, it's not weird. And in an American context, it is super freaking weird. Because it's not like she goes to a rural village, but you get the sense that she comes from a city. So she had to go from a city to a train to the bum middle of nowhere to this magical village. So I was already kind of pulled out the story because I was worried about little Lena, but I should have known it's a children's book. Nothing too bad's going to happen to her. But anyway, she makes it to the village beyond the mist, Silver Mountain Village, and there are 6 little strange houses there, including this inn that she ends up staying in with this really nasty witch-like woman who I can see directly inspired the similar woman in Spirited Away. And yeah, it's just a very interesting little tale. It's magical realism, I believe that would be the genre, because these magical things happen. A troll kid gives her candy, and after a few days, Lena's just wow, I guess that's normal, you know, there's talking birds, there's all types of stuff. I ended up giving it a 3.75 because it is very slow paced. I thought it'd be more adventurous like the film, but it is a very slow, almost contemplative story for a young child. And it really is talking about becoming independent, growing, and, you know, those types of themes, but in a way that is very like just weird. And I appreciate the weirdness of the book because I love weird books, but I feel that I'm in an age range where I'm too adult to see through the eyes of a child, if that makes sense. And so a lot of times throughout the story, I was just like, oh my God, Lena, you should be freaking out. Lena, oh my gosh. And she's just like, wow, wee, ha ha ha, if that makes sense. So I enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend it. I have some of the coloring pages because Libby did like this global event and made it available to all Libby users, and it came with coloring pages too from the illustrated book. And I will say the one downside, I did listen to this as an audiobook because I was on like a little trip and it was about a 3-hour audiobook. So I said, you know, round trip, that was about 4 hours. I can finish it then. And I do regret, well, I can't regret because my library doesn't have it, but I wish it had the ebook version because I feel like it would have taken the story to another level, seeing the illustrations and seeing the world through Lena's eyes. If I don't draw, the blank page will remain a blank page and never become a work of art. That is the line that stuck with me from the next book that I read in November, which was another comic arc. This one being a manhwa, I believe, when it is a Chinese work, and that was My Soulmate by Wah Kee. Now, excuse me, because given what typically is the stories I get from this publisher, I thought this was a BL. It is not, but it was still very good. I gave it a 3.5 stars. And just so you know, 3 stars is not a bad rating for me. A bad rating for me is I probably didn't finish it. And it's very, very rare I rate 2 stars. And I don't really ever rate a book 1 star because I just DNF. I'm a hard DNFer. I will put a book down. My library is ginormous. My digital library is ginormous. I got enough books read for several lifetimes. I don't really spend time on books I don't like. So a 3-star, really just explaining my rating system real quickly, is baseline. I liked it. 4 stars. I loved it. 5-star is I'm crying. I'm throwing up. This literally changed my life. Or just I was feeling really, really good and intense feelings when I was reading it. Again, it's a very mood-based rating system. But back to the story at hand. This one, if you've ever read Bakuman, this was very similar. It was about Hong Kong-based Chinese manhwa artists trying to make it in the industry. And this is not a spoiler, so that's why I'm saying it. The main character, there's 2 main characters, both of them comic book assistants. One quits his job to publish his work of art, his magnus opus, War of Zombies, and ends up dying in the process, which is a testament to the struggle and just unfair work practices that are in the comics industry worldwide. Anyway, he ends up possessing the body of a secondary comics artist who is working for his mentor. And essentially the story is just very, very odd, but it's funny. It keeps you engaged. It was, again, slow paced, and Storygraph can tell you I like fast paced work. So if something is slower paced and it's not like a work of literature in the sense that like it's a history novel, it's not basically the genres where I expect something to be slower paced. If it's a contemporary, any of the genre fictions like sci-fi, romance, etc., I want it to be like this. So you will probably, if you like slower paced books, give it a higher rating. That's why I was at 3.5 star for me. It was good, but just slow. And then by the end, it had a really weird, like, well, not really weird, given that they're writing a horror comic, so you kind of had this supernatural angle already with the possession, demon possession almost, if you want to call it that. So at the end, it kind of got this weird, like, exorcism vibe to it, which I'm smiling as I said that because it kind of sold the story for me. Can't really say anything else, as I usually say in these videos because I don't want to spoil it. And just going knowing that it's about platonic soulmates, because they basically find not only comfort, but companionship with each other as friends. And I find that to be just as rewarding as any romance out there. Okay, I finally don't have to fight for my life remembering names and also switching between Storygraph, because we go to the only physical book I read this month, and that was How to Woo a Warrior Orc by January Bell, a cozy monster romance, and the second book in the Wild Oak Woods series. Now, I say series loosely, and you see it was signed at Monster Errata Book Con. I believe that's how you say it. I keep saying I believe that's how you say it because your girl's too tired to look up anything right now. But even though the author says that you can read this out of order, and I did, you can see all the dog ears. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4.5 star. It is definitely a book that I actually feel like you need to read in order because it jumps straight into the action with our Kitchen Witch protagonist at the Pixie's Perch. Getting names real quickly because, you know, your girl read a lot of books last month. Piper right here is working/owns the Pixie Perch, and she has a employee, Garrett, who is an orc, a former warrior in like a blood sport arena of the Unseelie Court. And you get enough information, like I said, that you can read it out of order, but I really do feel like this is the one time an author needs to actually say read this in order. That said, I really enjoyed it. If you don't know, I love orcs. I have a dedicated orc romance shelf as well. I have an orc romance sticker on my Kobo, as you see right here, with this black woman. So I love orcs. So anything with an orc is bound to be a 4-star unless it's really, really bad. And thankfully, this was really, really good. I thought it was very cute. Piper, while annoying at some times, she was annoying in a way that made sense because she was a woman that had this sense that like she couldn't ask for help. She had to fix everything for everybody. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that actually. And I really love that Garrick was there for her, and she had this community of witches as well because she is a kitchen witch, which is also very cute, like making pastries and stuff like that. And yeah, recommended, and especially if you want a cozy fall themed read. Staying on romance territory, I had Leon Riley's Longing for the Minotaur, the second book in the Indecent Monster series, as you can see on my Kobo Libre Color. In this one, I would definitely say you can read out of order because these are true standalone works of fiction. This features step siblings Val/Valentina and Bannon, who was a former high school jock, and she's kind of like a goth girl, if that makes sense. And they have an indecent relationship, essentially. I feel like the ending was wrapped up in a way that was more fairy tale than him being a literal minotaur. So if that's not your thing, you're not going to get deep psychoanalysts in a book like this. But I think it did exactly what the cover promised. I typically don't read Minotaur romances. I'm really more into orcs and werewolves, and especially a Minotaur in a contemporary setting, that was really different for me. But I've loved pretty much everything this author has written, and this is no exception. And in December, on my birthday, actually, I should be getting a third book that she's written, so I can't wait. Okay, I'm going to try to speed through books 9 and 10. So first up, we have I'm Your Chubby Hero, and that was written by Nore, and it is a duology that is, I guess, BL, but I really feel like this falls into the category of like very intense platonic friendship, just my opinion, according to what I know about volume 2. But basically, this is about an actor in like a local theater troupe named Punjiro. He is on the chubbier side, hence the title, and he really wants to become an actor that's beloved by his fans. He does have a secret admirer and a secret super fan who is a pastry chef, and basically they have the cutest relationship, friendship. You define it as you want, and I really enjoyed it. It was a 3.75. Again, slow paced. You know how I feel about slow paced works, but I feel like it worked for what it was, and it was really cool getting that from Career Liberation Library because they really just do a lot for access to these types of books, so I don't have to spend my hard-earned money. So I hope to donate to next year because we need to support our libraries, especially libraries with a focus like that. Oh, and Punjiro's double eye moles are so cute. Last but not least, Release is my last book I read in November 2025 and my only 5-star read. Thank you to Kondasha once again for Dragon's Head, an omnibus of the first 3 volumes written and illustrated by Minotaur Mochizuki. And this is a infamous or famous work of post-apocalyptic seinen, so older teen, younger male adult, my cats are fighting, fiction that came out in the 90s, I believe 1999 or somewhere around that time frame. It is just really, really good. I actually read this series as a kid, a young adult, from my local library, and it was published back then by Tokyo Pop. So I am very excited that it's getting revitalized for an American audience. It is a very tough read because you see now, looking at them, not their age, these really young kids, like in middle school, going through the most horrific things you can imagine. Trapped in the first 3 volumes, got a train/tunnel system that is actively collapsing. It is a really tough read. It has some really, really dark themes, including sexual content between some of the villains that are all the same age, but still really intense. So if that triggers you, similar to Megaera that I kind of alluded to, please don't read this. But yeah, it's excellent horror. It has some iconic imagery, and it's just really, really good. I can't wait to re-experience the series. So with that said, that is my November 2025 reading wrap up. Until next time, bye!